Well, good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. It depends on what time you're watching this. And it's my great pleasure to introduce the filmmakers of Zana, the wonderful film from Kosovo that's playing in our Europe, the Voices of Women in Film program at Sydney Film Festival. And we're really very delighted to have with us the director, Antoneta Kastrati, and the cinematographer, Sevdije Kastrati. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much. We're very, very honored to be part of the festival, and I'm very happy that you're still making it happen. You know, I know this is really difficult times, and it means a lot, you know, just that our movies continue to be seen.
Absolutely. I think that what makes me most sad is that we couldn't have you here in Sydney to really celebrate with us. But I hope very much that in the future, both of you will visit the festival with one of your future films. I'd like to congratulate both of you on a really very intense and moving film. I watched the film again yesterday to prepare for today, and I was very moved by the film. I think it really captures the lingering impact of war, the grief, and this very powerful woman in a very difficult situation. And I think the film is all the more intense because both of you are survivors of war. You're sisters and survivors of war. For each of you, could you tell us how much of an emotional experience it was for you to make Zana?
Yeah, so I mean, Zana was something, the theme, it has been something I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and just finally it kind of came together and I found the way how to tell it. And yeah, it was very emotional at times, for sure, you know, writing the script. I mean, this is fictional, but then because it's drawing from a lot of very personal things, especially with my nightmares and what I've gone through in the last 20 years. But at the same time, you know, this is a fiction, so I had to, like, you know, I was able sometimes to have a distance, you know, and then doing it. But then during the production too, we had also our family members as extras, and we had a lot of the women that were in the village that had lost husbands and kids. They came to participate in the film. You know, in one of the memorial scenes, there were a lot of women that had lost people. And it really, it felt like it was like a documentary, you know, everybody was going through it. But it was something I really had to do, you know, so it's important.
Sure.
Yeah, it was an emotional experience. I mean, even now watching the film, I think like every time it's still emotional. Making something about something you have experienced and you know very well, and something like war, it's something that doesn't go away. So that was part of it all the time while we were also in production and also shooting in the area where we come from, and having a lot of people in the film, a lot of extras were family and stuff, so that there were scenes that are in the film that were actually really emotional on set while shooting too. So it was this thing of having to make this, you know, the emotions and also the professional side of like, we have to tell the story the best way possible and bring that to screen so that audience can also feel it. So it was quite a challenge.
Yeah, since you both mentioned it, I want to go to the scene of the memorial. And I think it's one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the film because it feels so visceral, it feels so real. And I believe many of the people who are in that scene are members of your family, are people who went through loss during the war. Could you tell us about the construction of that scene, how you brought that together and how you all made it through that scene? It must have been so extremely difficult.
Yeah, so it was that scene, you know, because this is low budget, so we were getting all these people who came for free. And it was also Ramadan, which is people were fasting, a lot of the people that were on set. And it was very hot and they were there the whole day without eating. And it was initially quite hard to get the reactions that we wanted because we had the speeches, and because I can't deal with every extra, you know, I was dealing with the actors. But my sister had the idea to make one of the women that's in the scene, like, sing this, it's like a wailing songs that they sing during when somebody dies. And it's actually in one of the dream sequences we hear this voice of the women singing. And so we had one of the women, who's my aunt, actually, and she's the neighbor woman in the film. She sang it with a microphone, and then it was very emotional. Everybody was crying. And because it's an improvised singing. But then, of course, she started talking about my mother and sister, and then it got quite emotional because I was watching my dad on the monitor. Like, my dad is in one of the shots, and yeah, I was actually crying. And but I was surprised that my sister was actually holding the camera. She was on the camera, and she had to actually continue. I think for a moment she stopped.
I did all the dolly shots and stuff, but there was one of the shots because very close to our main Tuluma, the main actress, it's our sisters are next to her, and we were doing one of the shots, and I just I had, like, it was a locked shot. I told my AC, keep the focus here, and I had to walk away because I just couldn't stop crying. It was really intense.
Yeah, and it's when you're working with your sister, so like she said, because we were 5 now. 3 of my sisters were right behind the main actors, and they were crying a lot, and it was intense. But then we had to go again, and this was the other thing because actors are not used to going again. I mean, we told them before the shoot that we're gonna go again and again, and people don't understand. So, but I remember, like, with my sisters, it was hard. But then I had to go, so it's these 2 parts of me. Of course, I'm the director, and I'm crying the next moment. It's like, let's go, I'm able to keep that distance, But I think
do it again.
Yeah, do it again.
I want to ask about the title of the film, Zana. It becomes clear to the audience by the end of the film, I think, the significance. But why did you call the film Zana?
I wanted to call the film the name of the little girl, as the name of the girl. But the Zana, it's this old fairy, it's an old legend, fairy, the protector of the mountains and of life. So it was a symbolic about what it represents and how life was destroyed. And this film is about how precious life is. So that's why I wanted, because that's what war destroys life. And I wanted that to represent, Zana, to be the name, But I know it translates sort of fairy in English, but it's really not, because it's this old, it's more of a goddess, and it's from a long time ago, and it has existed through centuries. They're like protectant of the mountains, and that's what has been killed. So I wanted that to embrace that, to be the name, to carry that,
Because Zana as a character, the little girl, is of course mostly absent from the film. We don't see very much of her. There are some incredible scenes that we do see her, but they're very brief. But in a way, by the end of the film, we're convinced that she is there, ever present throughout the film. That the memory of Zana, the deep feeling for Zana, is so vital to what we see playing out in front of us.
Yeah, it's sort of like, for me, it was important not to, because she doesn't exist in the present, but that, like, what I really wanted to portray was this, how her death and how death permeates the living, and sort of how Lume, she's in between sort of the death and the living, and I wanted her to capture that, not just to feel it, but really through her, she's kind of, Zana still is here, but Lume is also on the world of the dead. So it's kind of it's this thing that with motherhood and losing a child, it's not only about grief, she becomes the grief. You really become, and it's this timelessness, and how death comes in, and it's basically you're in a completely different time. So you're not anymore in the normal time. So I really wanted that to kind of bring it.
In terms of the research for the film, you conducted many interviews, which must have been, again, quite an emotional and difficult experience. Could you tell us about that process of research that you undertook in writing the script? So
initially I did research with women who've lost children, and so I went around Kosovo, and I was going for, initially, I really wanted to understand the dream process, and because that's something it's really very, actually, the dreams are, I would say, a filtered version of my own. My own have been even much worse. I wanted to understand whether this is something also the women are experiencing, or is it just me, and how specific. So I wanted to understand what their dreams are like. And then I was kind of drawing from that too. And a lot of their dreams, they said they still have nightmares and they can never see their faces, the kids' faces. And they have dreams where you see and they're turning, but then the dream stops, and it's always really graphic. And for mothers, this graphic aspect of death is something they can't overcome. So it was that, but also how were they able now to live? A lot of them, women that I interviewed, were physically sick too. A lot of them had headaches, and they felt like, and few of them had kids, but they told me how they couldn't really be any more mothers to their new kids, So that was like definitely a lot of what the research was included in it. And, and part of it is that, and part of it, it's me, I became a mom. I have 2 daughters, and that's why for me, this aspect of losing a child was really important, because it's my biggest fear, and I cannot imagine if I was in a conflict and I had kids. So I really wanted to kind of, yeah. And then the research with witch doctors, I have done a documentary in 2009 called Seeking Magic, and I followed women who are going to seek healing, And a lot of times it's another way how women are suppressed, It's they're sent to these healers, and sometimes it's very violent, and it's because there's a stigma around psychiatry and psychologists, so it's women are sent there, and a lot of times also for physical issues. Getting pregnant, yes, but it's also if you have like schizophrenia, and in this case, especially if you're having dreams, the interpretation of what the healers give you. It's
The film makes very clear this almost clash, or at least coexistence between the mystical and a very brutal reality. There's still in let's say many villages this belief in healers and even witch doctors. That's still very much a dominant belief, or a pervasive belief.
Yeah, it's still, even in the cities, some people, I would say half and half, but it doesn't coexist with people who are educated. It's not. And it's usually people go out of desperation because it gives you certain answers, for things that you don't have answers. And it's also, I think it's just easier to believe on something, that's out of your control, or that you don't have to look into why this is happening, But it does kind of, we grew up with it, in the village. We had a lot of relatives, and even my sister, when she was younger, she was 14, and she was sent to these healers. But what I saw with women was really interesting, because again, it's a lot of like brides are sent to these healers. And it's usually, because they're getting married in this very constrained, they're not able to do what they do, they're changing environment, and then they're very anxious, and then they start having hallucinations. And normally they say, they like stepped on black magic, and it's really something that it's so still very pervasive. But after the war, it has been commercialized. We have these new healers that are taking from all these different traditions and doing all this. Because before it used to be just an amulet, you write something down. But now they're doing all this, making a lot of money. So it's, and the guy, the character that's in the film, the main healer, it's taken from a real guy, that I did the documentary with.
So there's the shop next door that always has precisely what you need, and it is a well put together operation. Sevdije, I want to ask you a question. You're the first female director of photography in Kosovo, and I guess it's still a very male-dominated field everywhere in the world. Could you tell us about your experiences as a cinematographer in this male-dominated field?
Yeah, actually, when I started working on film right after the war in Kosovo, and it was part of a documentary film, and it was telling the story of what happened during the war. So that was something that I felt it was so powerful just to tell the story. And that's after that, I kept working on film. So it took me some time to realize, and I wasn't completely like in the beginning sure. I really enjoyed doing it, but then I figured out as I went that, okay, this was something that it was mainly men working in this field, but I really love doing it. I'm the first woman in Kosovo, and there's no school for cinematography there. Then I left and I moved to Los Angeles to study at the American Film Institute, and I just keep doing it. Yeah, luckily at this time there is a lot more women that are actually working as cinematographers, and a lot more are getting hired, but in a lot more, like I would say, in the indie world of film, not really big budget films. That's something still that we still are not there. I don't know what it has to do with this kind of mentality that only men can shoot something that has big budget and control it, which is actually not true. But white man, I would say mainly. So it's just a mentality. But I hope in the future we will be more and more part of it. There's a lot of great female cinematographers.
It's a beautiful looking film. I think you did a fantastic job. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have time for the final question, and I want to ask you about the Kosovo film industry in general. We haven't seen that many films from Kosovo at Sydney Film Festival or in Australia in general. A few years ago, we played a wonderful film called The Marriage, which has...
I shot that one too. I shot The Marriage too.
Oh, really? Oh, wonderful. And that also has the same actress.
Yeah, it is.
Plays Lume. But tell us what's happening with the Kosovo film industry. I think the few films that I've seen are extremely strong. And we see each year, not many films, but those films that I see from the Balkan region, all kind of somehow infused with this memory of the war, even if they're not directly about the war of that region, are so powerful, so incredible. But tell us about the Kosovo film industry in particular, and are many films being made? Are they being seen locally in particular?
Yes, so Kosovo film industry stagnated for a very long time because of the war. But I think in the past 6-7 years, finally things are starting to move, and we have a new generation of directors. And that's what's like really exciting. We have a Kosovo Film Fund. We have a young director of the film fund who is funding also young directors. And also it's half and half women and men. It's very progressive. And as a result, all these good scripts are being made into films. And we're starting to travel abroad. And we're starting to finally, the budget getting a little bit bigger. And I'm also the first generation of female directors, And Lerta, the other film you mentioned, she's also my generation. So in that sense, it's a very exciting time because it's a new wave of films. And it's more realistic films and dealing with a lot of topics, especially women, And I think it's doing really well, We're in a good path. And yes, war is... somehow, because it's for us, we were teenagers. I think a lot of filmmakers, the films that are coming out, a lot of us were teenagers, and whatever way you're impacted, it's going to continue for and it's a whole generation. Few generations are people that we have to deal with that. So, but it's an exciting time. She's going to say something.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that about the war and effects, because we have all experienced the war. And we are now getting to make movies, so it is part of us. So in some way, it is in the films too. It is present because it's something that's engraved inside of us. So, yeah.
Well, it's been so great to speak to both of you. Thank you so much for making the time. Thank you for a wonderful film. And we look forward so much to seeing your future works. We hope there are many, and we hope that you will visit us in Sydney with one of them when we're back in cinemas, when all of us are back in cinemas. We look forward to that very much. And thanks again so much for your time.
Thank you so much. And I wish I was there, it would have been my first time in Sydney, but thank you for making it happen. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.